In the year 1994, a man walked up a barren, windswept hill in the middle of nowhere, and by the time he walked back down, everything historians thought they knew about the birth of civilization was already starting to fall apart. The local farmers had a name for this hill. They called it Potbelly Hill. For generations, they had plowed straight over it, cursing the flat limestone slabs that kept snagging their equipment. Just rocks, they thought. Just an ordinary hill in an ordinary field. Nobody stopped to ask why those rocks were shaped so strangely. Nobody wondered why they were arranged the way they were. They should have, because buried beneath that soil was something that, according to every textbook, every accepted timeline, every assumption archaeologists had built their careers on, simply should not have existed. Not there, not then, not built by the people who supposedly built it. When the truth finally came out, it didn't just correct a footnote in some academic journal. It tore the opening chapter out of the story of human civilization and forced the entire field to start over. This is the story of Göbekli Tepe, the temple that shouldn't exist. And by the end of this, you're going to look at the history of your own species completely differently. Long before that German archaeologist ever set foot on the hill, other researchers had already walked right past the answer. Survey teams in the 1960s spotted the broken limestone slabs poking out of the ground and made the obvious assumption: an old graveyard, probably medieval, nothing worth a closer look. They wrote it down, filed it away, and moved on. For 30 years, that was the final word. 30 years. Sitting on top of one of the most important discoveries in human history, and nobody knew it. Then, in 1994, a researcher named Klaus Schmidt came to the region looking for something completely different. But something about that hill wouldn't leave him alone. The slabs were too deliberate, too uniform, too clearly shaped by human hands to be some forgotten cemetery. He requested permission to dig. What came out of the ground over the following months would consume the rest of his life. Beneath the surface was not a graveyard. It was a ring of massive stone pillars, arranged with obvious intention, some of them carved with animals frozen mid-motion. Foxes caught mid-stride, vultures with wings spread wide, snakes coiling up the stone as if they were still slithering. This wasn't random. This was designed. This was built. And then came the number that made Schmidt question his own instruments. The site was over 11,000 years old. Read that again. 11,000 years. To understand why that number is so explosive, you have to understand the story archaeologists had been telling for over a century. The one taught in universities, printed in textbooks, repeated in documentary after documentary. The story goes like this. Humans farmed first. They settled down second. And only after their stomachs were full and their villages were secure did they start building temples, inventing gods, and organizing religion. Civilization, according to this story, was the child of agriculture. Farming came first. Everything else followed. Göbekli Tepe doesn't bend that story. It breaks it in half. This site predates Stonehenge by roughly 7,000 years. It predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by a similar margin. It was already ancient, already buried, already forgotten before the wheel had been invented, before a single word had ever been written down, before the first brick of Babylon or Uruk had ever been laid. When the Great Pyramid was being built, Göbekli Tepe was already older to the ancient Egyptians than the pyramids are to us today. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The people who built it weren't farmers. No pottery, no metal tools, no domesticated animals to haul stone, no wheels to move it. As far as the evidence shows, they hadn't even settled into permanent villages yet. These were hunter-gatherers, small, scattered bands of people who followed gazelle herds and wild grain across the seasons, sleeping in temporary camps, carrying everything they owned on their backs. So how exactly does a population with no cities, no kings, no writing, and no permanent home manage to organize itself well enough to quarry, carve, and raise multi-ton stone pillars, some standing taller than a two-story building? That question alone should be enough to keep you watching. But it's only the beginning. Picture the world as it actually was when construction began. There are no cities anywhere on the planet, not one. The entire concept of urban life hasn't been invented yet. And yet, somehow, hundreds of people are coming together again and again, year after year, to haul limestone blocks out of a quarry, shape them by hand, and stand them upright in perfect, deliberate rings. Researchers estimate it took roughly 500 people to construct even one of the site's massive enclosures. 500 people, no metal chisels, no draft animals, no blueprints, no written instructions passed down. Just muscle, rope, fire-hardened tools, and something powerful enough to make that many people drop everything and commit to a project that had absolutely nothing to do with food, shelter, or survival. That kind of labor doesn't happen by accident. It requires leadership, it requires planning, and most of all, it requires belief. A shared conviction so powerful that it could pull people out of the daily grind of staying alive and convince them instead to spend months of their short, brutal lives raising stone into the sky. So what exactly were they building it for? Walk among the pillars today, and you're surrounded by a menagerie carved in cold limestone. Foxes crouched and ready to spring. Vultures with wings stretched wide. Serpents twisting down the columns in tangled, overlapping lines. Wild boars baring their tusks. Scorpions frozen mid-scuttle. Notice something about all of it. None of it is peaceful. None of it is decorative, in the gentle way we'd expect from later religious art. These are dangerous animals, predators, venomous creatures, and they were chosen on purpose, carved in exactly the positions the builders wanted, over and over again, across pillar after pillar. Now look higher. Some of the tallest pillars aren't shaped like animals at all. They're shaped like people. Arms carved in relief along the sides. Hands folded carefully at the waist, as if the stones themselves are standing guard over the enclosure, watching, waiting. Nobody knows exactly who or what the hell they're supposed to represent. Ancestors watching over their descendants? Spirits of the land? Something closer to gods, given form for the very first time in human history? What's undeniable is this: the people of Göbekli Tepe weren't just building shelter, and they weren't just marking territory. They were telling a story, carved permanently into stone. A mythology, a belief system, an entire cosmic worldview. And we can still see it with our own eyes, but we can no longer read a single word of it. And that's where the story takes its first real twist. One that split the archaeological world straight down the middle. For over 100 years, the assumption was simple. Agriculture builds civilization, and religion comes afterward, once people have the free time and stability to think about gods. Schmidt looked at the evidence in front of him and reached a conclusion that felt almost heretical. What if it happened the other way around? His reasoning was this: feeding hundreds of workers over and over at massive seasonal gatherings would have demanded far more food than casual hunting and foraging could reliably supply. That pressure, the sheer logistical nightmare of keeping that many mouths fed, may have been exactly what pushed nearby communities to start deliberately planting and cultivating wild grains. Not because they were hungry nomads looking for an easier life, but because they needed to feed a religious gathering that had already outgrown what nature alone could provide. In other words, ritual didn't follow farming. Ritual may have forced farming into existence. Let that sink in for a second, because if it's true, it means something enormous. It means shared belief, not hunger, not survival, not economics, is what first pulled scattered, wandering human bands into something resembling organized society. It means the temple came before the farm. The myth came before the field. Not every archaeologist agrees on the exact order of events, and the debate is still very much alive today. But even the skeptics admit one thing they can't argue away. Complex ritual, monumental art, and large-scale human cooperation existed before farming, not after it. That single fact alone rewrites the opening chapter of civilization. And just when you think the mystery can't get any stranger, it does. Because there is a second theory swirling around Göbekli Tepe, a more controversial one that most mainstream archaeologists dismiss outright. But that refuses to go away because the evidence carved into the stone is genuinely hard to explain. Look closely at one particular pillar, the one researchers nicknamed the Vulture Stone. Across its surface is a dense, layered scene. A vulture with an enormous wingspan, a scorpion, a headless human figure, and a strange circular symbol positioned above them like a small sun or a distant object in the sky. A handful of researchers have proposed something extraordinary. That this pillar isn't just mythology, it's a record, a memory carved in stone of a catastrophic event that struck the Earth around the same time as a mysterious cold snap known to scientists as the Younger Dryas, a moment roughly 11,000 years ago when the climate plunged suddenly and violently, and some researchers believe a comet or fragmented impact may have been the trigger. According to this theory, the animals on the pillar aren't just animals. They're constellations, star patterns, frozen in stone, marking the exact date of a disaster that the builders of Göbekli Tepe witnessed, survived, and were determined never to forget. Now, to be clear, this is not settled science. Most archaeologists remain deeply skeptical, and for good reason. It's an interpretation, not a proven fact, and mainstream researchers argue there are far simpler explanations for the carvings that don't require ancient astronomy or global catastrophe at all. But the theory persists, stubbornly, precisely because Göbekli Tepe keeps producing details that are difficult to fully explain away. Whether you find it thrilling or far-fetched, one thing is certain: this hill has a way of making even hardened scientists start asking questions they never expected to ask. And then, just when the site had already rewritten the timeline of civilization once and hinted at a forgotten catastrophe twice, it delivered its final, most haunting twist of all. Around 8000 BCE, after centuries of continuous use, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something that almost nobody expects when a sacred site is abandoned. They didn't simply walk away and let it crumble into the landscape. They buried it, on purpose. Deliberately, methodically, layer by layer, they filled the enclosures with rubble, broken flint tools, and packed soil, entombing the very pillars they had once labored so hard to raise into the sky. Thousands of hours of backbreaking work poured into concealing thousands of hours of backbreaking work. And here's the part that should send a chill down your spine. It's precisely because they buried it that we're able to stand there and study it today. That deliberate act of burial is what protected the site from 10,000 years of erosion, looting, and decay. In trying to hide their temple from the world, they accidentally preserved it perfectly enough for us to find it 11,000 years later. But why bury it at all? Was it a ritual closing, a symbolic death for a temple that had finally served its purpose? Was it a desperate response to some crisis or catastrophe that struck the region, forcing an entire belief system into premature retirement? Or was it simply the final chapter of a religion that was already fading, already being replaced by something new, something we haven't discovered yet? Nobody knows. Klaus Schmidt spent 20 years of his life trying to find out, and he never got his answer. He passed away in 2014, still convinced the site had barely begun to reveal its secrets. Excavation continues to this day, and remarkably, less than a third of Göbekli Tepe has even been uncovered. Whatever else is buried beneath that hill is still down there, waiting. And it turns out, Göbekli Tepe was never alone. Archaeologists have since uncovered an entire cluster of related sites scattered across the surrounding hills, separate communities that appear to have shared symbols, rituals, and early farming knowledge with one another, forming a kind of hidden network of belief, stretching across the region thousands of years before anyone thought organized society was even possible. Some researchers push the connections even further back, drawing tentative lines to far older traditions from deep in the Ice Age. Cave art, shamanic ritual, and mythologies that may stretch back tens of thousands of years across an entire continent. It's a bold, still debated idea, and far from proven. But it raises a genuinely unsettling possibility that the roots of human ritual, storytelling, and belief run far deeper and far older than Göbekli Tepe itself, and that faint echoes of those forgotten traditions may have quietly shaped the mythologies of Mesopotamia, and perhaps even stories we still tell today. So stop and think about what that actually means. Stand on that hill in southeastern Turkey today, and you're not just looking at old rocks in the dirt. You're standing at what may be the true opening scene of the human story, thousands of years earlier than anyone ever thought to look. Before the first city, before the first field of cultivated wheat, before the wheel, before writing, before bronze, before anything we normally associate with the birth of civilization, there were people standing on this exact hill, carving vultures and foxes into solid limestone, hauling multi-ton pillars into place with nothing but muscle, rope, and belief. And then, when the time came, burying it all with their own hands. They left us no names, no written language, no explanation, just carved stone, deliberately hidden, patiently waiting 11,000 years to be found again. And maybe that's the real twist, buried underneath Göbekli Tepe, more shocking than any comet theory or catastrophe myth. Civilization may not have started with a plow, a harvest, or a granary full of grain. It may have started with a story, a shared belief so powerful that it moved mountains of stone before it ever moved a single field of wheat. And somewhere, 11,000 years later, that story just reached you. If it pulled you in the way it pulled in every archaeologist who's ever stood on that hill, don't stop here. Because history has buried far more secrets than this one, and they're still waiting to be dug up.